Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Today is the day we do Mythbusters, and the co-host is Chris Rossini. He is also the editor of the RonPaulLibertyReport.com website. Chris, nice to have you with us today.
Great to be with you again, Dr. Paul. Thank you.
Good. I guess we'll find a couple myths that we need to talk about and try to straighten it out to the best of our ability. Do you have anything on your mind today?
Yes, we do. We have another batch of good topics. So we'll start with the Republican Party. And this is a party that long ago discarded following the Constitution or even living up to its words as being the party of limited government, small government. We're at a point in the game where there is no party for limited or small government. And it appears that Donald Trump, of all people, is giving the coup de grace to the party. It's yet to be seen. There's still a lot that can happen. But let's just hypothetically imagine that the Republican Party does disappear. Would that solve our problems, Dr. Paul?
No, it'll lead to a lot of confusion, but I think that whole issue is a bit irrelevant. Because I think the Republican Party had self-destructed a long time ago, because it's been many, many decades now that there has not been much difference between Republicans and Democrats. In rhetoric, yes, there's some differences, but if you look for a significant change in foreign policy or monetary policy or welfare policy or government involvement in education or medical care, they're really the same. But most people don't believe this. So yes, the Republican Party doesn't stand for much, and the old Republican Party that pretended and at times supported limited government, that's dead and gone. So I think we miss the point if we think we get rid of the Republican Party. It's just a branch of the Democratic Party. They're just two branches stuck together, and it's a vehicle that allows people to get involved. So I don't think that it matters much, if the Republican Party disappears. I don't think it's going to disappear, but I think it's essentially, defunct, and they don't represent much. But what the Republican Party leadership is concerned about is who's running the show, who's the boss, and who's directing the action, and whose special favors are being taken care of. And that's a contest between Republicans and Democrats usually, but now there's a contest, within the Republican Party. I think it's all good that there's this debate going and disarms, the political process and the power. But I would say that if the Democrats were honest with themselves, they would have to start thinking about, will Hillary destroy the Democratic Party? And I think this is all a reflection of the fact that we're bankrupt literally, and our ideas are bankrupt, whether they're economic policies or foreign policies, and they have nowhere to go. But I don't think the Republican Party is going to disappear this year. It may change a little bit, but there's nothing to replace it. And I think this is a distraction in many ways from the issues that really count. I've never felt like I was a member of a political party, but it was the only vehicle available. And so it was a pragmatic thing. But the parties don't stand for anything, and I think it's important to realize that if this party bickering isn't very important. The only thing that really counts ultimately is change in views. So as much time as I've spent in politics, I think for the most part, politicians are totally irrelevant, even when they sound like they're going to take us sharply to the left or sharply toward populism. I think they're irrelevant because they're not dealing with the issue of the significance of the breakdown of the economic system. I see what we're talking about today is the end of a major era in our history, maybe in the history of the world, that we are on the verge of proving that economic planning, Keynesianism, inflationism, and paper money, it's all a fraud. And that's not being talked about. It's much, much bigger than what's going to happen to the Republican Party. Sometimes I get to ask that question on TV. Well, what do you think about the Republican Party or what he does might hurt the party? Quite frankly, I really don't care. But I do care very much about ideas. And if ideas prevail, believe me, they will influence the Republicans and the Democrats, and that is what has happened over the years. Keynesianism and welfareism and warfareism has engulfed and has controlled both Republicans and Democrats. That's what we have to change.
Despite the current reality that the Republican Party doesn't represent small government, the rhetoric is still there. In fact, Ted Cruz's campaign is obviously trying to get libertarian votes. They're trying to portray Ted Cruz, who wants to carpet bomb nations, as the libertarian voice. And following the blowback in Brussels, the sad situation that happened there, Ted Cruz ratcheted up his police state and war rhetoric by saying the following, quote, "We need to empower law enforcement to patrol and secure Muslim neighborhoods before they become radicalized." And Donald Trump agreed with him 100%. Now, does this have anything to do with libertarianism? Dr. Paul, please.
I think this is an easy one. No, nothing. It has nothing to do with libertarianism. But it's a fraud. And matter of fact, for some reason, I sort of take it personal because, you know, I have tried to promote libertarian ideas, and I don't like people coming in and co-opting the title or an association and say, yes, we want the Ron Paul supporters, Rand's out of the campaign, now I'm the libertarian. People shouldn't fall for that. I mean, there's no way. And it happens to a degree with Trump. Trump says, and Trump doesn't do this very often when he gets co-opted, but when it came to this surveillance of the Muslims here in this country, Trump says, I agree. So they're both this way. And you know, even Trump's foreign policy is militarization, send 30,000 troops here and there and rebuild the military that hasn't been torn down. So, but Cruz, with his position of carpet bombing the Middle Eastern countries and his determination to continue the Bush policies of preemptive war, and now this position is really a reflection of civil liberties. He would have been, I guess, jumping up and down for the liberal who was far removed from libertarianism, FDR, when he rounded up Japanese American citizens who had done nothing wrong, and they really weren't even strong suspect. But it is this careless attitude about civil liberties and foreign policy that is our problem. So I think that it's absolutely misplaced if anybody thinks, if they have libertarian leanings, that they can resort to saying, well, I know Ron might have been better on this issue and Rand would have been better, but we have to go with the best thing, and we'll just have to hope Ted Cruz will become more libertarian because he says, I want the libertarian votes. Well, I think it's a myth to think that Ted Cruz is going to enhance the libertarian message and promote the libertarian cause.
Right. Next, Dr. Paul, let's go to Donald Trump. And recently, I think it was this week, he named a few people that he's going to look to for advice for foreign policy, and none of them were household names. However, we do know some household names that he is hanging around with, like Rudy Giuliani and Jeff Sessions, so which are all neocons, one would say. And the Washington Post, in a bizarre move, put in big, bold letters that Donald Trump has outlined a non-interventionist foreign policy. Now, has the word non-interventionism lost all of its meaning? What do you think, Dr. Paul?
Well, I don't think he's going to be a non-interventionist, but non-intervention, and another word pops up in those same articles, that he's an isolationist, and therefore he's a very bad person because he wants to isolate from the world. I wish he were a non-interventionist because, of course, that means we are for free trade. So Donald Trump is not for free trade. He doesn't want to associate with the world. He wants to build walls, and he doesn't want to open up doors. You know, he hasn't been generous about defending opening up doors with Cuba nor with Iran. So I would say that he himself is very much of an interventionist, and I think he's a person that might not even have a concrete philosophy. I think he shoots from the hip. And he also shoots something else off too, because he has a different position on every speech on the same issue. He starts off by loving people and then he hates the people. So I think his foreign policy is like that. But you know, the real problem for us coming from a libertarian viewpoint is if we object to this, then all of a sudden we find our allies to be the Republicans' establishment, the old Bush clan. And here we have Jeb Bush endorsing Cruz. So they're very much involved in that. That's why this whole idea, whether it's Cruz or Trump, is going to make libertarians happy. And like we talked about the party, just getting rid of the party isn't going to help. We have to have the ideas change. We have to have an economic understanding, a change in foreign policy, and how this is a big factor in blowback and the unintended consequences, and how it participated in the bankruptcy of this country, and try to get people to deal with the big issues. I think this election is such a distraction from this very, very important issue. And if I can narrow it down to one thing, it's debt. It's $210 trillion of unfunded liabilities that are coming due right now, and there's no way to pay it. So unless we have people who are honest and really are libertarian leaning, at least, we're going to end up like Detroit. And it's not going to be pretty, and then we won't be talking on the fringes about who has a token effort to protect our liberties, because I think the authoritarians will be hot and heavy in expressing and expanding on their authoritarianism, and that to me is what is frightening.
Yes. And finally, Dr. Paul, we alluded to it earlier, but there was tragically, again, blowback in Europe, this time in Brussels. And very predictably, American politicians, it was like deja vu, trying to explain it away by saying we have to defend our democratic values and we have to defend democracy. I mean, are we supposed to believe that someone, an Islamic radical, wants to blow himself up because Americans are able to choose between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton? So, Dr. Paul, what's the real prescription on getting rid of this blowback once and for all?
Well, I think that is a big myth, and one of the most serious myths that has floated around since 9/11, that disgruntled and violent jihadists and Islamists want to come and kill us. They do. But the fraud of this, the real myth is, and Bush started all this, and that is that they want to do it because we're free and we're prosperous and they resent us. Well, I don't believe that for a minute, that is the reason. And they have to think about the reflection, of the foreign policy that we have, and that, of course, is the major reason. But for us to come back and say, well, we promote American exceptionalism. We are the good people. We never purposely kill anybody. We kill a lot more, but we don't do it purposely, and there are always accidents, and we can apologize and give the people money who might not be combatants, so we pacify ourselves. But we are promoting democracy. Well, even the founders of this country resented the idea of having democracy. They weren't promoting democracy. They were promoting freedom, which is entirely different than promoting democracy. So we go on. We don't have a real democracy here at home. Like we've said so many times, that the political parties are one and the same. If you're in an alternative party, whether you're a libertarian or belong to the Green Party, do you get a fair shot? Do you get covered by the media that's in bed with the government? No, you don't get a fair shot. Do you get into debates? No, never. So what do? We say democracy. We are the promoter of American exceptionalism, so we're going to take hundreds of thousands of troops. We're going to invade the Middle East, and now for 15 years or longer, that we are going to invade the Middle East, and we're going to make them all good Democrats. And on occasion, they have an election. But sometimes those elections didn't turn out like our CIA had planned. And we resent it. Then we get rid of the people that are elected. And what do? We pretend that we care about democracy and liberty, and one of our closest allies is the most ruthless on human rights, and we're engaged in a war with them, and that's Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is the home base of the radicalization of Islam that are, matter of fact, 15 were from Saudi Arabia that came on 9/11. So this whole idea that we care about democracy. Well, if we did, why don't we go over there and preach that to the Saudis, that we ought to have more democracy there, which would be darn right foolish. I think that we should believe in liberty. We should understand what free markets are all about. We should understand what the proper foreign policy ought to be. We ought to follow it. It would produce so much peace and so much prosperity for us. Other nations would say, why is America doing so well? And they're not bothering us, and we don't hate Americans nearly like it was when they were bombing and killing us. People would say, maybe we ought to follow them. That is the way to spread the exceptional qualities of many Americans. Doing it by the force of guns and the force of arms, it won't work. It's a myth that is the way it should be done, because the more we do that, the worse we get. We get poorer and less free constantly. I hope the American people wake up to that, because it's not in the camps of the Europeans to deal with that. It is in our camps to deal with our system, to set that example that others would want to emulate. And Christopher, I want to thank you for being with us today for our program of Mythbusters.
Thank you. It was fun. Thank you.
And I want to show appreciation to our viewers today, and hope they come back soon to the Ron Paul Liberty Report.